if you've been living under a rock, then you're not aware of the fact that right now Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, and then I believe also Peter Frampton are pulling their music off of Spotify in protest to Joe Rogan and the Joe Rogan Experience having on the audacity to have on the likes of people like Peter McCullough and Robert Malone. And so these aged artists that no longer have relevance in the culture anymore and think that people actually care are pulling their music in order to go to another platform. So the hosts of The View took this story and tackled it in the most effervescent, most enlightening, most just life-changing, life-altering, mind-altering way that you could possibly imagine. So here's a little bit of their playful banter.
It's not Spotify's job. We have a First Amendment in this country. We have to stick with it. You can't just pick and choose when you want to use the First Amendment.
I disagree with that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you what I mean, what I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree that Joe Rogan is a horror. But the way to counter that bad speech is with more speech. The way to counter it is with boycotts. I admire Neil for doing this, Neil Young. He's from the 60s, you know, where musicians took political stands in those days. They didn't just let everything go the way they're doing now. I mean, I don't see too many people taking a stand right now. So maybe other musicians will follow suit, and that would be legitimate. But it's not a cancel culture, it's a consequence culture. And the way we handle is we don't buy Spotify. We ignore Spotify.
Yeah, but don't you want good corporate citizens, Joy? I mean, you have, you know, people always came down on Facebook and they came down on Twitter and they said they're disseminating all this dangerous information. Don't they have some accountability for it? It is their platform. It is their business. And I want a good corporate citizen.
I mean, I've just got to tell you, Sunny just seems like she would absolutely fit in well in communist China. A good citizen corporation. What she means is she wants a corporation that does what she thinks they should do. Now, again, this could be like, this is the problem with postmodernism. We can't come up with a conclusion as to what good citizenship looks like. No, we absolutely can. It just doesn't look like what Sunny says is good. No, it actually has to do with morality. We'll jump into that in just a minute, but I want to unpack the actual point of the conversation here is that they should step away from Spotify. They should run as far as they possibly can. We should support people like Neil Young. And here's the real issue, I think, is that they're going to support soft censorship here simply because they know if they really support censorship, well, then they're going to be on the chopping block eventually, right? This is the whole Martin Niemöller thing. Like first they came for this person, then they came for that person. And I know these analogies are overwrought, but ultimately the poem is important because eventually they'll come for you, but there won't be anybody left to speak for you. So the View hosts are only defending Joe Rogan only insofar it is self-preservation for them. So they don't really care about free speech. They don't really care about intellectual dialogue. They don't really care about having thoughtful conversations. If that's not clear to anybody at this point in time, then I don't know what I can do for you. Their show is proof positive that they don't actually care about intellectual dialogue and diversity of thought and diversity of opinion. So that's really the thing that they're after, is they're after a strong stance to cater to their vocal, hysterical COVID mob that watches their show, but then also self-preservation so that they don't go too strong on Joe Rogan because they know that they could easily be the next in line. Now, here is the big problem with the controversy writ large, as far as I can tell. The truth is that these are people that are desperate for cultural attention. I mean, just look at this article right here. Harry and Meghan Markle, the Markle twins, expressed Spotify concerns over Rogan vax controversy. So now these disingenuous people, just like those on The View, and perhaps even Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, regardless of the fact that they're from the protest generation in the 60s, what they are presently is culturally irrelevant. And so they're moving away from Spotify simply as a plea for attention. I think that's the biggest issue here. But there's other issues concerning this Joe Rogan controversy. And the other one is that, and this is perhaps the biggest one, when you look at these people who have an issue with what Joe Rogan is doing by having Robert Malone on and having Peter McCullough on, there is no actual real rebuttal of evidence. There's no people coming against the things that Robert Malone and Peter McCullough said poignantly or specifically. They're just calling it misinformation. Now, the funny thing about misinformation is that if I had said a year ago that cloth masks don't work, I could have got kicked off YouTube and that would be labeled misinformation. If a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I had suggested that COVID came from a lab in Wuhan, the coronavirus lab in Wuhan, rather than from a bat, that would have been labeled misinformation. The point is that there's this fine line between misinformation and the information you don't like. And there is no clear rebuttal based upon the facts of what these people are saying in any of the articles against these people. I dare you, go through them, prove me wrong, put a link down in the comments section. Everybody that's fighting the misinformation coming out of Joe Rogan doesn't actually have any counter information or any actual firm rebuttal of what these guys are saying. Not really when you dig into it. It's all semantics, and it's all the immediate claim of misinformation thrown against people to see if it sticks, and it's totally disingenuous. So misinformation is mostly an invented term to otherize people. Here's Joe Rogan saying something similar to that when he issues a quasi-apology, which I somewhat respect because he doesn't have to give it, but also wish he wouldn't feel the need to answer some of these ridiculous people. But anyway, here's his response on Instagram about this controversy.
One with Dr. Peter McCullough and one with Dr. Robert Malone. Dr. Peter McCullough is a cardiologist, and he is the most published physician in his field in history. Dr. Robert Malone owns 9 patents on the creation of mRNA vaccine technology and is at least partially responsible for the creation of the technology that led to mRNA vaccines. Both these people are very highly credentialed, very intelligent, very accomplished people, and they have an opinion that's different from the mainstream narrative. I wanted to hear what their opinion is. I had them on, and because of that, those episodes in particular, those episodes were labeled as being dangerous. They had dangerous misinformation in them. The problem I have with the term misinformation, especially today, is that many of the things that we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now accepted as fact. Like, for instance, 8 months ago, if you said, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you would be removed from social media. They would ban you from certain platforms. Now, that's accepted as fact. If you said, I don't think cloth masks work, you would be banned from social media. Now, that's openly and repeatedly stated on CNN. If you said, I think it's possible that COVID-19 came from a lab, you'd be banned from many social media platforms. Now, that's on the cover of Newsweek. All of those theories that at one point in time were banned were openly discussed by those 2 men that I had on my podcast that have been accused of dangerous misinformation.
And here's the real issue at the end of the day. Critical thinking is dead. Critical thinking is dead. And so now we want people to do our thinking for us. I remember not so long ago, very small debates that were solved very quickly about whether or not Mein Kampf should be published and should be released. Mein Kampf, of course, is the autobiography of Adolf Hitler, how he came to prominence and how he developed the views that he has. Now, some people thought, no, we should not spread this hate. We should get rid of this hate. We should destroy it. But then other people said, let people think for themselves. Let people read the book. Let them see the total ridiculousness and the self-verifying, self-effacing nature of truth, so that when people read this, they don't even need a disclaimer at the front of the book saying, you should never do this. No, when they read the book, they understand because it's evil at face value when they read it. So they read it merely to see what evil looks like, without the need of a disclaimer. Now, we are living in an age where we desperately want to insulate people from everything that we disagree with. And I believe we're better off living in an age where people can say whatever they want to. I've said this before, and I hope that it resonates. People aren't necessarily rushing to Joe Rogan to get their medical advice. This is a lie. This is something that is used to try to distort the truth, to try to suggest that people are dying because of Joe Rogan. This is not true. If we're going to have a real substantive conversation, let's have a substantive conversation about how regulations passed down by the government being imposed upon medical facilities are actually one of the reasons that the death toll is so high. I've had 2 people in my family already with COVID that have died, and almost all of them can be traced back to the way in which COVID is being treated in these hospitals. But yet there's no national conversation about whether or not the regulations being passed down by the CDC and the HHS are actually healthy and good for individualized patients and individualized care. No, we're not interested in that conversation because we'd rather just paint things misinformation and just do what we're told rather than to think for ourselves. Critical thinking is dead. It's our job to be responsible for how we handle information. It's not anybody else's job to figure out what information should be told. You can catch brand new episodes of Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman every Monday and weekly bonus episodes to keep you thinking throughout the week. But you have to subscribe and click the bell to be notified when new episodes drop. If you enjoy this content, make sure to like this video and share it with friends.